Hi, my name is Sha. A few of you may know me, but I'm kind of assuming that most of you don't. So thank you. And thank you to Wes, thank you to Dave and Jer and Caitlin for taking a chance on me. 2 years ago, I attended the first Eyeo and was stunned to see my heroes walking around like some kind of strange, nerdy runway show. And last year, I gave a talk at the Eyeo Ignite and drank picklebacks on a bus in the middle of the night. That night, for me and Rachel, I think, will be remembered as the night that we met Jen Lo. And up there, saying, "Hi, my name is Sha," is kind of how I've always started my talks. It's a way for me to have a familiar beginning. But I'm actually super nervous right now, both because I've been asked to give the last talk this year, and because earlier this week, my name has totally changed for me. Many Chinese names are about strength or fortune or luck, and I've always loved that Sha in Chinese means sand, something humble and small. But my mom told me on Monday that why she named me Sha is it comes from a Chinese saying, 一沙一世界. From one grain of sand, you can see the world, which is a hell of a thing to carry around. So this is how I feel right now. And this is how I feel watching everyone at Eyeo present. I can't even see your faces right now. Eyeo is insane. You know this by now, of course, but I just want to say it out loud. Eyeo is insane. But it's insane in a very specific way. Eyeo is magic. When we watch these incredible people present, we are watching magicians, and we are watching magic. And Eyeo reminds me of something that Dan Katz said about Stamen design, that attending one of their workshops was like watching a Penn and Teller routine. That you can watch these incredible people show you all of their secrets, share with you their process and ideas and code. But in the end, the way they put it all together is still magic. That the magic does not diminish with knowing how it is done. So good. Anyways. That when we come to Eyeo and watch people like Jen or Kyle or Zach or Georgia or Amit speak, we understand that the magic of their work comes not from being superhuman, but from being deeply and desperately human. From being incredibly open and caring and honest. And I also want to confess something to you, that I have moved more than 20 times now, that I have changed jobs and professions and industries, that right now I am homeless and jobless, that for me, Eyeo is home. And I hope, whether this is your first year or your third, that you've found a little bit of home here as well. I know at least that none of you are here by accident, that we have all made choices to come here, that we all have taken time to come here, that we all lead various and disparate paths to here, but that we have all arrived, that we all have been taking part in this home building over these past few days. And it's these disparate paths that I think are so incredible, that it is this diversity that makes us strong, and that we should stay conscious of that and defend it in the years to come. That this community is a forest that wasn't planned or planted, but was protected. That Eyeo is home for those in between, for those from somewhere they didn't start. And I'd like to start off tonight by telling you about two paths, a hard life and an easy one, my mom's path and mine. My parents were born in Beijing in the 50s. And in 1968, during the Cultural Revolution, because of a policy called Shangshan, Xiaxiang, young children from urban areas were moved to rural ones to learn from the farmers there. My mom, along with her 12 classmates and my dad, were sent to a village in Inner Mongolia. Altogether, 17 million children were relocated. My mom lived and worked for 6 years there, my dad for 10, working on the farms instead of middle school and high school. Their old lives ended. My mom was crushed. But she still wanted to go to college. And in 1972, she applied to Beijing University for foreign languages, what she wanted to study. But she was denied. When she applied again in 1974, she was told that she was unfit to study foreign languages, and a recruiter told her to apply to medical school. She got into Beijing Medical, and she fell in love with surgery. And she studied to be an eye surgeon. But in the last year of med school, she discovered a bone cyst on her index finger, an infection from her time working on the farm. And in the last year of med school, the tip of her index finger was removed, and her dream of becoming a surgeon was gone. So she studied more. The highest degree China offered was a master's, so she sought out PhD programs in the US. In 1981, she was accepted into Cornell and flew in for the first time with her suitcase that she'd brought from Inner Mongolia when she was a child to America. And 8 years later, after I was born, she had to watch Tiananmen unfold from afar on CNN from Ithaca. But in those years and decades since, she has taught thousands of students, worked in the CSU system in California with men and women whose families had never graduated high school, and is now a dean at a university in Northern California. And I'm telling you this not so you feel sorry for my mom. It's to say that in my mom's handshake is an untold story of sacrifice, of obstacles and being told no, that she had her life changed out from under her so many times, had to fight sexism and racism, battles she still fights today. And it's to say that despite her hardships, she was able to build support structures for others, create programs, raise funding, and inspire students. It's to say that because of her, my life has been easy. I've been given the luxury of the space and time to choose where to go. My life, in contrast, has been a series of stumbles, leaps, and falls. I stumbled into engineering at Berkeley because I thought I loved computers and fell out of it because I realized I hated computers and I loved making things with computers. I fell into architecture because I thought it would be a good way to learn industrial design, and I ended up falling in love with architecture. And it brought me to New York, where I fell out of love out of constructing buildings, fell out of love with the practice. I left architecture to go back to San Francisco to Stamen Design to do data visualization. And while I was there, I met a friend who would later become my co-founder, helped him start a company we called Movity, ended up surrounded by tech people, and went to meetups where people wore other people's logos. And we studied cities at Movity, and we measured flows, we mapped data sets, and we tried to make cities easier to use. And about 2.5 years ago, we sold our company. We sold ourselves and our time to a company called Trulia. And there we continued the work we started at Movity, launching what were experiments and sketches as maps for Trulia nationwide. I got to work with incredible people like Joe Golicky on ambitious projects and organized events for the DataViz community. And 4 months ago, Rachel and I left it all behind. We packed up our apartment, moved out, and left San Francisco. We left, and we flew. We left, and since then, we have been traveling. Starting in New Zealand, going to Australia, then to Kuala Lumpur, to Bali and Thailand. We went to Hong Kong, to Tokyo, to Naoshima, Teshima, and Inujima, to the collapsed island of Gunkanjima. We went to Osaka, and we flew to Seoul, and ended in Shanghai, taking a couple of days to go to Huangshan, mountains in China. And then we flew back, first to San Francisco, and then a few days ago to here. For the last 4 months, we have been traveling. And right now, we are homeless, living in a borrowed room, and jobless. And all in all, we've done so much. We learned how to dive. We kayaked, we canyoned, we zorbed, we snorkeled, we rock climbed. We hiked mountains above the clouds, and we dove down to wrecks under the ocean. We stayed in hostels and dorm rooms, in couches and Airbnbs. We stayed in hotels and resorts, on beaches and on coasts. We did so much. And looking back, it still feels a little unreal. We went from the wild beauty of New Zealand and Australia to the dense urban metropolises of Tokyo and Shanghai and Seoul. And I still remember how long 4 months felt when we started. When we first got on the plane to New Zealand, when we napped on a beach after our overnight flight, when we woke up on that beach, it felt like an unending dream. And I still remember how quickly that time became real, how staying a month in Australia meant not staying a month in Thailand, how each choice we made meant giving up 1,000 others. When time pressed, we chose, and I have no regrets. But what I am trying to say is that for the last 4 months, Rachel and I lived an entire life. We were born on that beach, and we passed away when we got on that plane back to San Francisco. A life that we led out of 2 rolling suitcases and a couple pairs of shoes each. We left that life behind. And I think about that sometimes. I think about my life, the path I've wandered down, the choices that I've made. The decision to leave engineering, the decision to leave architecture, and the decision to leave a design firm to start a company. The decision to be acquired, and the decision then again to leave. The many directions I could have gone, but didn't. And I often wonder what it must be like to live like lightning, how it behaves. You see, how we perceive lightning is as kind of a jagged streak through the air, a burst of energy. But lightning, how it behaves, is very different. How lightning starts is by sending out 1,000 tiny fingers, called leaders, that spread across the sky, that search for a charge. And when one of them finally touches ground, finally finds home, the lightning we see pours all the energy out from the clouds into the ground. And I wonder what it must be like to live those 1,000 lives, to live those infinite variations and choices before choosing what to put our energy towards. But we can't, right? We have to choose without knowing. We have to feel out for ourselves that unending complexity in the air. We get one life, one lifetime to spend. For those of us who make things with our hands through writing and code, who are marketed for their talent, this language is especially meaningful. The word talent originally was used as a unit of currency. That's its origin. That's what we have to spend. And how much do we have? Measuring it out, we have on average about 2 billion heartbeats in our lifetime. We'll maybe take 700 million breaths. An average American will actually end up walking over 100,000 miles in their lifetime. All these numbers are a little bit too big, a little bit too vague to understand and realize. But 100,000 miles is 4 times around the world. We have the capacity in us to walk around the world. I repeat, we have the capacity in us to run circles around the world. That alone should be cause for at least a little bravery. And with these heartbeats, these breaths, these footsteps to spend, what do we do? What do we work on? There are kind of paths and structures familiar to many of us. We work at ad agencies and design firms or studios on client work. Or we join startups and companies to work on product work. And I think of these frameworks of paths as like ladders, something Matt Jones said recently. These ladders with their rungs kind of close to the ground, ways and structures, support structures to allow us to climb up. And there are other paths that are a little bit more independent, pursuing a career as an artist, starting our own company. But these ladders, if they are there at all, are a bit out of reach. To attempt to be an artist or an entrepreneur is to jump in the air and grasp and hope many times, hoping to grab a hold. And there are incredibly brave people out there like Golan trying to explore new territories, make new ladders, lower the existing ones. And of course, we don't walk linearly through this, right? We meander wildly. We fill gaps with freelance, or we become free agents ourselves, a sort of creative coding mercenary. Some of us are lucky to engage with the client system with a little more agency. Some of us are lucky and are sought out enough to choose who to work with. Some of us live lightly enough to coast along without having to refuel often. Some of us are choosing not to engage at all and forge new businesses, sell unique products, fund ourselves. Some of us teach and find the spare time to pursue our own work. But still, for many of us, we work on ads. We don't work on ads, but then get our work ripped off by ads. And then we work on ads again because at least the agencies pay us directly. We work for harsh clients and we hustle as a studio or as individuals. We spend our talents like currency, but not on us. We give it to others. We run ourselves ragged because we care more about than just specs or requirements or deliverables. Our work is not made to be measured. We care about experience and inspiration, about aesthetics and motion and flow. And there is a harsh way to view this, which is that this stress we often feel when we work for clients is the effort of squeezing all of that time, all of that energy and care into a structure that has no obligation to it. That corporations are not people, which is both an excuse and a reason not to act like one. That they are made to be measured, that they have to move like sharks. That we should be wary when people like Michael Eisner attempt to be the embodiment of a corporation, and we should be grateful when people attempt to make corporations as compassionate as humans. Because we have more obligations than corporations. We have more obligations than our own self-interest and preservation. We have obligations to each other, to ourselves, to our community, to our environment. We have an ethics that we are all expected to abide by, and a morality that helps guide us to operate in the world. Humans have society, but companies as entities only have themselves. There's no society of companies, or there is, but it's incredibly violent and scary. Companies have a very high infant mortality rate. Families tear themselves apart. We talk about Facebook killers and Google killers and iPhone killers. And how would you behave if your whole life you were told that you were only as valuable as a single number on your head? If you were made to be measured, that children may someday kill you, you'd be a little crazy. Without the endless work of the humanization of brands, they would not seem to have souls. These would be mad entities. Without apps that delight and connect, without the interface and design, the iPhone is just the monolith, the thing that makes apes break old bones. Which is maybe what disruption is, the breaking of bones. And I'm not trying to impart any sympathy here, and I'm not trying to say that all companies are like this. I'm trying to describe the rules and the goals that we've set up for them. Because while our obligations are complicated, theirs is simple. The system we have set up for them to operate in is a model, and therefore necessarily a simplification. So what then? How do we start to extend our attention and care to the things that clients and corporations don't feel any obligations to address? There are systems around us of unending complexity, so there are many places to start. But we can start to look at who are the winners of these systems and who are the losers. Some of these winners are these big companies that practice rampant tax avoidance and defend it because it's legal. But it's insane. Companies that that can win by performing tax maneuvers like the double Irish or the Dutch sandwich, things that sound more like bedroom exploration than business strategy. And yet these strategies are the same reason that Google pays about 2% in taxes overseas, why Apple paid about 8% in the US, and why Facebook, of course Facebook, actually got a tax refund of about $400 million this year. It's a metagame, right? To make money from the shuffling between countries. For the most part, we don't play this game, right? Us in this room. People like us lose in these shufflings. We are the magicians. We make magic with our hands. We write and we code. We make art and installations. We decouple ourselves from the system, but that doesn't change it. It just hides it from our view. Mike Magursky said this a couple months ago, that things like wealth and access and innovation don't flow from the core to the gap. They accrue where they are already in the highest concentration. That we have to actively work incredibly hard to push in the other direction. And even bigger than that, there's no accounting for the environment we're in. And while the change around us is slow and constant, and our attention to it is sparse and limited. When Rachel and I would tell people on our travels that we were going to the Great Barrier Reef to dive, people would respond that it was good that we were going before it was gone, as if it were a movie to catch. They would say this as a joke, but it was the kind of joke that you say to cover old wounds, as if to sigh and say that we have no obligation to our home. And it's hard not to get angry about this. Finding things to be mad about is easy, right? I've barely dug in. This is the most superficial of examples. It is a fertile garden of shit out there. It's also easy to respond to this with snark and cynicism, the kind of flinch that people who have been hurt before have. But I think it's much harder and much more valuable to respond with the same sort of desperate care and radical empathy that I see in the work of Jen and so many others here at Eyeo. And Jen said something really eloquent earlier this week, that the particle is as important as the system. And that's what I'm trying to get across tonight. But I'm also trying to say what the generative artists here and what the software engineers already know, that the system is the work, that the code is the art. And I'm also trying to say that there are people in this crowd doing this sort of work, this work of questioning and exposing systems, the work like Liam doing, and talking about things that clients aren't addressing, using the same tools and mediums that we use every day. Jemre made a very simple piece projecting the view that he used to have onto the new condo building next door. Yeah, you're welcome. David Wicks made an installation showing the flows of water resources, showing the fierce needs of various areas in America. Wes and Nick at Pitch Interactive made a visualization of the escalating drone strikes and all the civilian casualties since Obama's election. These pieces are not easy to watch. These pieces are not easy to make. And these pieces aren't pieces of cynicism. These aren't jokes. These are serious. And the final example, Kim Reese with Periscopic made an incredible visualization of the gun deaths in the US, one that starts to show the weight of all of this violence. And it's true. It's hard to find the time and the space for this kind of work. That the people brave enough to do this work no one is paying for should be applauded. That they had to carve out time to find this. So tonight, I'm letting you know that in the coming months, I'll be announcing a fellowship. The details aren't settled yet, and I have a lot of work to do, but I want to fund this kind of work. Work that clients or brands aren't paying for. Work that addresses the world. And I don't have much, but I have enough to give someone the space and time to breathe. And I'm telling you this both as a promise to support this kind of work, but also as an invitation to the other institutions and firms and agencies and individuals in this room, because we have work to do. We have support structures to build. And if you agree with that, please let me know. Because right now is a time of protest. Because Engin, a recent ITP grad, is in Istanbul right now. It is documenting what is going on. He said the crowd has become experts in throwing back the tear gas bombs with metal gloves. Because this was 5 days ago in Hong Kong, where people gathered to mourn all those killed at Tiananmen. Because 24 years ago, all my mom could do was watch. And because in the face of all of this harshness and violence and these metagames, we have the capacity to live desperately human lives. And it makes me think of June Jordan, one of my favorite poets, a former professor at Berkeley, a strong black woman whose constant struggle and endless compassion reminds me of my mom, her energy and her willingness to teach and empower others. And I just want to read to you the end of a poem called Poem About My Rights. I am not wrong. Wrong is not my name. My name is my own, my own, my own. And I can't tell you who the hell set things up like this, but I can tell you that from now on, my resistance, my simple and daily and nightly self-determination may very well cost you your life. And that's what this is about. For the last 4 days, we have converged to inspire, and soon it will be time to go back. And while our memories of Eyeo will fade, while this life we have lived here will end, I want us to start our new lives tomorrow with this in our minds. I want us to know that we are makers of magic. Know that Eyeo is home, that it is a safe place for those of us constantly in between. That there are countless untold stories going on in the world around us. Know that there are 1,000 unlived lives we can lead. Know that we can choose and that we are constantly choosing. Know that we have the capacity in us to circle the globe. Know that we have the bravery in us to live like lightning. Not how it behaves, that impossible fracturing across the sky, but how we see it. A jagged line carving through the air, not straight by far, full of twists and turns, odd choices and wild meanderings, but so full of energy, so bright that it hurts, and a boom and a thundering that can be heard for miles and miles and miles. Thank you. Good night.